Good evening, everybody. Let's just start by just checking in. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Make sure the sound is all right. All right. Thank you, Samir. Late night for you out there in the East Coast. I'll try to keep you awake. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Brian and Linda. All right. So we'll go ahead and we'll get started. Can all join your palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. And keeping the palms joined. All right. Good evening, all, once again. Thanks for being here. I always like to start with a question just to get us started, give some time for people to settle in before the meditation, and also gives you a chance to communicate a little bit. So question, how about, it's kind of can be very vague, but how easily distracted are you during your meditation practice? So, and there's a million ways to respond to that, none of them right or wrong. But when you settle into meditation, and as you know, your mind's going to wander and jump and race and things like that. But how easily are you distracted? And how difficult is it for you to come back to present moment and breath? I'll go ahead and type that in here in a minute, but how easily distracted are you? All right, let's see here. How easily distracted are you? And for those who are joining us for the first time, welcome. You'll see a chat box somewhere on your screen. Feel free to respond with as little or as much as you'd like. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a chance for you to share. How easily distracted are you during meditation? How quickly are you able to come back to present moment? So, of course, I'm asking you this question before we do the meditation. So, gives you a chance to be very honest with your response and then observe your meditation as we practice. It's I think for me important to understand that as we sit and do a meditation practice, there will always be distractions and happen around us, and our mind will be pulled in different directions. And so that's not necessarily the problem. The real challenge is our ability or inability to come back to present moment. And we recognize that this meditation is really just a kind of a sample or an example of how well, I don't like to use the word poorly, but to make my point, how well or how poorly we do throughout our day at staying focused and on task with whatever it is. So for me, training the mind to be present during meditation is really just a reflection of how we do throughout our day, which is as we're working, as we're talking, as we're eating, as we're doing anything whatsoever. Does our mind wander constantly throughout the day? And do we lose focus? And do we easily get off task where one moment we're focused on a project and then next thing you know, 3 hours have gone by and we've not come back to it? So just things to recognize. All right, let's see here. And again, if you're just joining us, the question is, how easily distracted are you during meditation, and how quickly are you able to come back to present moment? So feel free to just share your responses here. No right or wrong answers. Vicky, I can't tell if that's a dog or a clown. I think it's a dog. And you're probably referencing star in the background there. But the little emoji also looks like a clown. So, all right, Lisa, very, but always a work in progress. Yeah, definitely. It's important to remember, whether you've been at this a long time or whether you're brand new, that it is a practice, and it's not something that we conquer in 6 months. It's something that is a lifelong practice. So, always a work in progress. Katie, easily distracted for sure. Yeah, I think that's probably pretty consistent for most. And I think the meditation practice itself is, as I said earlier, a really wonderful opportunity to improve our ability to concentrate and focus, not just in the meditation, but in everything else as well. Samir, very easily, it's often a tense transition back to the present moment. Yeah, which is interesting because it's not a tense transition out of the present moment, but for some reason we struggle and are challenged coming back to just sitting and breathing, as if it's just not as exciting or not enough for us. So our mind is so easily distracted and pulled in so many directions. Mario, pretty distracted. Not surprising. The less I'm on my phone in the morning, the faster I come back to my breath. Yeah, it's interesting how, phone, social media, these types of things. I mean, if you think when you're just scrolling through, Facebook or Instagram feed or whatever it is, in a matter of a minute, you see like hundreds to thousands of images, and just so much flying by us, and we can get really lost. So allowing ourselves time away from these things is important as well. Denise, given that I have ADHD, it's ever present. I'm doing better catching myself before I go down the rabbit hole. Yeah, for sure. It's interesting because anytime anyone brings up ADHD or ADD, there was years ago, there was a classroom I was going into at one of the high schools. I go in every week, and this was a group of students that specifically had been diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. And I remember going into class one day early, and there were two kids, and they were playing chess, and they had the hardest time doing meditation. But I just kind of stood over there in the corner waiting for them to finish, and was observing them playing chess. And there was there could have been a fire in the building, and these two kids were so focused on this chessboard. And it was always something that stood out to me, that when it came to schoolwork, when it came to meditation, when it came to so many things, they really had a hard time paying attention. Meditation was torture for them. But when they were playing chess, there was no lack of concentration. So what I learned, at least from that moment, was that we all have the ability to truly focus and concentrate if it's something that's important to us. And obviously that's easier said than done, and more challenging at times than others. All right, Chuck, sometimes very distracted and difficult to return to the present. sometimes not very distracted at all. The degree of distraction seems mostly due to my mind, not external noises, for example. Yeah, definitely. It's sometimes noises can be labeled distractions, and sometimes noises can just be opportunities to recognize present moments. So, we could hear a car outside or a dog next door or the air conditioning running or whatever it might be that, is around you. I think of all the sounds around the temple, the creaking stairs or the doors opening and closing or, somebody sneezing, all these types of things. These present moments, just like that, that's not a distraction. That's just what's happening in this moment. So, sounds around us can actually be really beneficial to practice, where it reminds us, here we are. And very often we don't like being where we are. So, all great thoughts. And so, with that, we'll go ahead and we'll start the meditation practice. There's a couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Excuse me. For those who might be joining for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you. You will not float away. You will not have any mystical, magical experiences. Your mind won't shut off. It won't stop racing. You won't think nothing. Often people think that meditation is about thinking nothing or going blank, right? Your mind is going to continue to race, as we've discussed. And the practice is simply to recognize the racing mind and come back to present moment. So posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on a cushion, it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you're on a chair or couch or wherever you're seated or standing, just try to keep the back straight and body relaxed. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important is don't expect anything from this practice. We're just going to work on being present and breathing. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply going to continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing. but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it, release that thought, return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought, release that thought, return to breath. Letting go of expectations, letting go of judgment from the practice. keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound, each thought, each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing, learning to be comfortable in stillness, in quiet, breathing in, follow breath in, breathing out, follow breath out. And with the body still and rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle, know what it's like to just sit and breathe, knowing with each breath there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go, no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. And once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. And recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's not from how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's not from sounds around us or anything else for that matter. Simply your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awaken. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. We react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, and still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap toward the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, and focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This is not an easy practice. It's not necessarily fun. But meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be present with things as they are. Training the mind to be with each moment as it arises. And in each moment, can we respond from a place of kindness, compassion, wisdom? Do we respond to each moment with the intention of benefiting ourselves or benefiting others? Or sometimes both? It's important to recognize why we do the things we do. So much of this practice is about the intention. All of it, really. The intention behind our actions. And when we slow down and we give ourselves time throughout the day to just take a few moments and sit and breathe, watch the mind race, come back to the present moment, watch the mind race, come back to the present moment. And we continue to cultivate and train ourselves to be present. We slow down enough to explore why we think and say and do what we do. And for me, for a long time, that was just the practice, was recognizing my own levels of greed, my own levels of anger, and my own levels of ignorance. That was it. Wasn't even trying to change anything or do much more than just recognize. The awareness was key. The awareness of the thoughts and the words and the actions. That can be very difficult and sometimes a little scary. But as Dogen said, the great Zen master he lived 1200 to 1253, he would say you must begin to know the self before you can get rid of the self. Meaning that Buddhist teachings talks about going beyond the self to a place where, as the Buddha taught, non-self. But before even worrying about any of that, you have to get to know, what is this self that you're attached to? What are the stories you're telling yourself about who you think you are, who you think you should be? Stories about your past that you carry with you, concerns and worries about your future that you continue to ponder. What are all these stories that we're lost in? Can we just be present with things as they are? So with that, I'll pause. I always prefer to use the rest of the time to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with. And if you are joining us for the first time, again, welcome. You should see a chat box somewhere on your screen. Feel free to type in any thoughts or questions around meditation, Buddhist practice. And I'll take the next really 15, 20 minutes to just respond to your thoughts. So feel free to share whatever you'd like. I think I started tonight with the idea of, how easily or quickly we are distracted. And I found that the practice of being patient with ourselves is incredibly important. So as your mind wanders and you get distracted, be patient with yourself. It's not so easy. Our mind has been wandering and been distracted our entire lives. So be patient as we continue to work through training the mind. All right, there's a question here. Hi, Jeff. Was wondering what your take on the worldly famous event of Thich Quang Tok. What's so interesting from your perspective? Why did they do that? To self-inflict, to stop chaos? Question. So this is an image, an event where the Vietnamese Buddhist monk, um, during the time of war, I believe it was during the war, maybe shortly after, at some point, I don't recall the year, you may know, but where the monk had set himself on fire. And there's an incredible image of him sitting there in meditation as his body burns. And, this question comes up every so often. And I first want to say that, I don't know what it's like to be in anybody's mind. I don't know why anybody does anything they do. So, to ask a question of, my perspective on something uh, with regards to someone else's actions, um, I try not to go there too much because I don't want to guess at what other people are thinking or doing. And so, I'll start with that. But what I will say is that for someone, this is a very delicate subject, but for someone who truly understands that the cycle of rebirth and the endless continuation of consciousness, uh, that they've gone beyond attachment to this physical form. And I'm referring to anyone at this stage of practice, really, not just this one individual. Now, on the surface, you can look at someone setting themselves on fire, and this concept, which I deal with a lot uh, and have dealt with a lot, is the idea of suicide. And the state of mind that we are in when we die is incredibly important. So, for one to have a mind that is calm and steady and clear, and make the choice to physically end this cycle, that consciousness is in a very pure place and will continue on. Now, we think of where the mind is at in many situations where people take their own lives, and it's not that case. It's not that way. It's very heavy, it's very painful. Um, and so, to break it down very simply and not to make it sound so superficial or crude, but think about when you wake up in the morning and you're in a good mood. The moment you wake up, that good mood will continue on for a period of time. Maybe it's a minute, maybe it's a half a day, whatever it might be. But that good mood kind of continues a little bit. And if you wake up and you're in a bad mood immediately, that bad mood continues on. Now think of rebirth no different than that. That consciousness that continues on. What is it like the moment there is the death of the physical body? So obviously, to your question, why did they do it? Was it to stop chaos? Um, Again, I can't speak to why anyone does anything, um, but only to an individual's mind being at a very different place than ours. So, just some thoughts on that situation. Other thoughts, questions, meditation, Buddhist practice? Yeah, very heavy. Heavy topic, heavy situation. Um, I don't. Uh, I look at someone like a Dalai Lama or Thich Nhat Hanh. These kind of modern day, uh, incredibly enlightened beings, and recognize that my mind is very different than theirs, and so I can look at their actions, I can look at my actions, but knowing my mind is very different, I don't ever try to compare or think that I can be like someone like that presently. It's nice to have this idea of having these incredibly um, kind, compassionate, wisdom views all the time, but it's just not realistic for me. So I don't try to think, well, if they did this, then I could do that. Um, I just try to be aware of my thoughts and my words and my actions and continue to cultivate more kindness. So, other thoughts, questions? And I will add that, when you think about your daily life, it's yet just another reason to try to keep the mind in a healthy, positive place. We never know um, when our time is up. And I don't see that as a negative, depressing thing. I see it as the truth. The reality is that I don't know when my life will be done in this physical form. So, uh, to have the greatest chance of my mind being in a good place, then when that moment comes, then the practice is to always have that mind in a good place. That's the practice. Is that easy? Of course not. Um, we're looking at the teachings of one enlightened human 2,500 years ago. We're not talking about endless beings who've been enlightened all these years. These are the teachings of someone from 2,500 years ago. So what that tells me is this is not easy. And it also tells me to not treat Buddhist practice as if there's a goal or that I'm trying to accomplish or attain something, because I'm not. It's the practice of kindness, the practice of understanding, the practice of forgiveness, the practice of compassion. It's constantly practicing these things. So, all right. Katie, not sure how to ask. I find social media to be a very chaotic place for the last 2 years, and now I work on social media. What is a thought told onto that can help me stay centered when working? Yeah, that's a tough one. I can relate. I spend a decent amount of time in various capacities, various functions with social media, and I think that it's important to understand that anything that we observe, whether it's social media, whether it's being in traffic, um, whether it's being in a room full of people, whatever we observe has an opportunity to be incredibly chaotic and hectic. Now, there's often a question, two things come to mind. Um, One is one of my favorite Zen expressions, which says, to a worm in horseradish, the world is horseradish. And what that really means in this situation is that if we, with regards to social media, only allow ourselves to see the negativity, the chaos, the hatred, the ignorance, if that's all we focus on, then we can very easily become that. And the question that often comes up is, in various ways, people have asked me, do I think the Buddha would have used social media? And my response is yes. I personally think so. This is just a guess. As I said earlier, I don't try to know what others would do. But I think about the platform that we have in social media, for example, that can reach so many people, as we know. And so social media is simply a tool that can be used for beautiful, positive, gentle, kind thoughts, or a tool that we can allow ourselves, to use the metaphor from earlier, to get kind of go down this rabbit hole where we're just so negative with what we're reading and seeing. And so I know for me, it's been a practice to, how can I phrase this? I consider myself kind of a one-way social media person. And what I mean by that is I'll share thoughts, whether they're just, you know, daily motivational things, or, even some maybe controversial topics, or things that'll really stir the pot, so to speak. But I don't use it any further than that. So I may share something that I know is going to trigger people certain ways, but I'm then not going to spend 45 minutes going back and forth with people, debating or arguing or trying to prove my points. And so, kind of what's a thought to hold on to that can help me stay centered when working? The real practice is to not attach to anybody else's thoughts or views. Share what you want to share, read what you want to read, but understand that every individual has their own thoughts and views and opinions on every situation. And, Thich Nhat Hanh says nirvana is freedom from views. It's a beautiful talk. It's on YouTube. It's titled, I believe the title is "What is Nirvana?" Uh, I think, was like 7 minutes and 42 seconds. It's pretty brief, but he gives a talk saying that nirvana is freedom from views. So if you come back to the nature of your question, where it says, I find social media to be a very chaotic place, I agree with you. Yes, social media is incredibly chaotic, but only if we are attaching to our views and the views of others as these permanent, concrete things, meaning my view is right, your view is wrong, and that's it. If that's how I view the world, then yes, social media is going to be incredibly chaotic. But if I view social media as just a simple opportunity for everybody to share their own ignorance, mine included, then I'm not kind of ranking or judging people's responses. I'm just seeing them as expressions of their own views. Right? Now, it's difficult when it's people we know and love. It's difficult when it's strangers. It's always going to be challenging when people kind of push back on things. But again, can we just appreciate people's views? Doesn't mean we agree with them. It doesn't mean we like them, that we like the views. But I really think holding on to the idea that social media and every other form of communication is simply a means or a platform for people to share their unenlightened, ignorant thoughts. Because that's all it is. None of us really know. So, um, yeah. So I don't know. Hopefully that's helpful. Um, but I also think, and I said this earlier, so I'm kind of repeating myself, but I always think of Cynthia, who's been around for a long time. I don't know, she's usually here on Saturday morning, but been around the temple a very long time. And the news, just the general news, TV news, would be such a trigger for her. And so one day I just said to her, I said, Cynthia, you should watch less news. And if she watches less news, she'll be less triggered. If the news triggers you, don't watch it for 2 hours. You'll be triggered for 2 hours. Watch it for 10 minutes, then you'll only be triggered for 10 minutes. And yes, social media, we're stuck on it sometimes. So sometimes there is no escape, but see how we can limit what we see. All right. Good question. Brian and Linda, I'm not clear why it's important to be in the right mind at the time of death. So think of, I always love summing up rebirth and the continuation of consciousness in like 3 minutes. So think of the fact that when we die, again, this is the belief of people at the time of the Buddha. So it's not that the Buddha invented rebirth. It's not like he stood on some mountaintop and yelled, "You're all going to be reborn." The people in India, 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ, all believed that there was a rebirth or a continuation of consciousness or reincarnation, whatever phrases you want to use. And if you went up to them at that point in time and said you have one life and you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were crazy. Now today, most of us, the way we're raised that this is our life and this is it. And then we die, we'll go to heaven, we'll go to hell, and that's it. And you can choose to believe that or not believe that. But that's what most of us in a Western culture are raised with, which is very different from what it was like at the time of the Buddha or many Eastern countries today. And so the reason I gave the example of waking up in a good mood and the good mood continues is that our consciousness at the time of death is very important because that's what continues on. So think of it as at that moment you're in a good mood and then boom, you die. Well, then you're in a good mood when you die. And that good mood will carry on. You're in a bad mood when you die, well, then you're in a bad mood. And that bad mood will carry on. Now, there's also the collection of consciousness and karma for endless time that has a big factor. It's not just the moment of death. But I remember when I was in the monastery, one of the beautiful practices is when someone was, what we would consider really hospice and kind of their last moments, the monks and nuns would chant. So all the individual was hearing at the time of death was the Buddhist sutras and the chants and the mantras and the prayers. And so their consciousness was really, really clear, really at ease, really at peace, really settled. So think of it as a, what's that physics, a body in motion stays in motion. Is that what it is? I never took physics, or at least I don't think I did. If I did, I wouldn't have done well at it. But think of it that way, that, if it's in motion, it'll stay in motion. So, yeah, hopefully that's helpful. All right, Marisa, love that everyone should. Yeah, I mean, and the reason I say that about everyone sharing their own ignorance is that, and I say that obviously myself as well, that the Buddhist teachings around wisdom is that we overcome ignorance with wisdom. And so as I always share, that instead of exploring or trying to figure out what is ultimate wisdom, I try to figure out where's my ignorance? Where am I not seeing ultimate truth? And that's in pretty much everything, right? In just about everything I do all day long, I'm coming from Jeff's lens, Jeff's views, Jeff's perceptions, Jeff's ideas, Jeff's conditioning, right? These are all my own views coming out. That doesn't make them truth. That makes them my perception of truth. And my perception is very different from what the true nature of reality is. It's the, a metaphor is, for example, if you love pizza, which I do, and I can tell you what this pizza tastes like, but you don't have any idea what the pizza tastes like until you take a bite. And whenever you take the bite of pizza, whatever that experience is for you is still not the experience that I just described. So it would be incredibly ignorant for me to tell you what pizza tastes like because I'm not right. That is only my perception, my experience of it. My experience of what pizza tastes like is going to be completely different from your experience. Even if we both like it, we still experience it different ways. So that's an example of ignorance, that I am being ignorant in telling you that this is what pizza tastes like. You must taste it, you must experience it, and have your own relationship with it. But most of our lives, we spend expressing to people our views and opinions and judgments on things. And those are just our own attachments to what we think is right. And that's the ignorant part. So, kind of tying Maurice's comment, back to Katie's question earlier about social media and me saying everyone's sharing their own ignorance, that's all social media is. It's just, as I said earlier, a platform for us to express. It's actually, again, I do have a lot of because I do use social media quite a bit now for a lot of things. There are certain things that I do as well. One thing is that when there's a story that I want to share, right, I don't share it with my perspective typically. Maybe I'll say this is beautiful or something like that. But for example, the news that just came out, Nabis, I'm probably not saying his name properly. My mistake. But the individual who plays for the Raiders, who just publicly came out as being gay, and it is big news because it's the first active NFL player to come out. And so this is huge news, and this is news that I think is really beautiful and important and life-changing for so many people. And it also is going to be a trigger and make a lot of people upset and angry and have problems with it. So when I share a story like that on social media, I just share it. I don't go into 3 paragraphs about what I think about it. I'll usually put like 3 little joined palms emojis, or I'll say like, such a beautiful story or something like that. So I'm putting a little bit of a perspective on it by saying I think it's beautiful. But I share it for then people to see it and have their own relationship to that story. So I try to keep that in mind a lot with social media as well. All right, last thing here, and we'll wrap up. Katie, thank you. You're welcome. Brian and Linda, thank you. You're welcome. Chuck, a body in motion stays in motion. So I was right until a force acts upon it. Yeah, well, I guess that force is also yours. So, yeah, your force is moving it. All right, so we'll close on that. We'll go ahead and we'll join palms. We'll do a transfer of merit. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained be transferred to Duke during his time of rebirth, and to Travis and Candace and Tony and everyone else who is suffering at this time from Duke's loss and passing. May they all be at peace and free from suffering. right. Couple quick announcements before you head off. Thanks all for being here. Really great questions, heavy topics. Setting yourself on fire to rebirth. We touched on physics. So thank you for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened up 14 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. So those of us who lead, we're not monks or nuns. We're not gurus or masters. We're not teachers or looking for students. We're just practitioners doing our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and share it with those who show up. We closed 15 months ago due to the pandemic. So everything is online, virtual. All of our classes. We have a wonderful recovery sangha for anyone battling addiction. We have our college group, alumni group over the summer. Morning meditation Monday through Friday, making beanies and hats for those living on the street. So there's always something going on. As I've shared recently, we are getting closer to reopening. We don't have a date set yet. We don't have any final announcements on that yet, but I promise once we do, you will all be notified. But we're hoping over the next few weeks, 3, 4, 5 weeks, we will start having some classes again at Temple on some level, at some capacity. But we'll keep you posted on that. So until that time, please be safe as always. It's wonderful to see in San Diego so many people vaccinated and doing their best to stay healthy. But this pandemic is still very real. It has not gone away. So let's do everything we can to respect that and be safe and smart and not put anybody at risk as usual. So thank you all for being here. I wish you well, and we'll see you soon.